Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Jeff Dover. With me is John Barban. Let's talk football.
All right, we're down to two more games. The
Four
semifinals. Yep, 4 teams. And I mean, do we think these are the 4 teams we expected to see here?
I mean, probably not, since the top 4 teams based on the rankings are not in the semifinals. So that feels like an upset until you tell me that Boise State and Arizona State are 2 of the teams are upset. Then that doesn't feel like a big upset.
Right.
But no, Georgia and Oregon does seem like a pretty big surprise, especially since Oregon was undefeated all season until last week. And
at the beginning of the season, if you were told these were the 4, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas, and Notre Dame, I wouldn't be too surprised.
I would be shocked that neither Oregon or Georgia are in the top 4, made of the Final 4.
Really?
Yeah.
You didn't think in the 12 team playoffs
you told me
how
beforehand,
they could have got picked off?
If you told me in the beginning, if you said that the Oregon, Georgia, and Alabama, none of them are going to be in the top 4 in the semifinals at the end, I would have been like, that's a crazy season.
Now, who out of the 4 feels like you're surprised? What, Notre Dame, Penn State are there? Are you actually surprised Ohio State and Texas are both there?
No, I'm more surprised that Oregon, Georgia, and they're not there. It's not so much.
It doesn't work like that, Jeff. You have to replace them with 2 teams. You have to upset some other fan base right now. Which? Go ahead, Jeff. Tell them which team's not supposed. Is it a Buckeye? Look, I gave the Buckeyes 2 shirts today.
Yeah, exactly.
I happen to have 2. There's some teams I have duplicates. I like the O here, but I also like the full logo. But anyways,
No, listen.
Let's hear it, Jeff. Which teams would you take out?
Exactly. Right now, it's like to call Notre Dame and be like, "Listen, we've thought about it. We're really sorry, but let's face it. Oregon deserves like another shot, and so we'd like to take you out." Listen, they beat. I thought that Notre Dame had no chance to really upset Georgia, even though Georgia's with their backup QB, and they did. Yeah. So hats off to them. So all 4 teams here deserve to be here. That doesn't take away the fact that I'm surprised that some other teams aren't here.
Yeah, I guess moving forward, since we've never had a 12-team playoff, all of the usual. Okay, how about this? All of the usual suspects made it to the 12-team playoff, or do you even find there was a couple that didn't even get there? I mean, I'm surprised Ole Miss didn't get there.
Ole Miss, Bama, and South Carolina. Like
No. Preseason. I doubt you thought South Carolina preseason.
No, but Bama. I'll give you. So Bama and Ole Miss, I thought would have been in there, but no. But I mean, that's about it. But you can. Here's the other thing that's weird, just like in terms of ranking, because technically Penn State is 6, Notre Dame 7, Texas 5, Ohio State's 8. Ohio State's 8, but probably like the best looking team right now. So like the lowest ranked team that's on fire the most, right? So. Yeah, these things can happen. This reminds me of some of the NHL playoff stuff where like sometimes you can have a lower ranked team get hot at the right time, especially with a hot goalie, and then make a long run, So Ohio State, it turns out the Michigan game was an anomaly, and they've really put it together against 2 good teams, and they're looking great now, which reflects the 6-point favorites they have right now at a stadium in Texas. So
let's get into that.
Let's go in order here. Let's start with the Notre Dame Penn State game. So do you have a pick on this one?
All right. What are the lines again? I don't have them open.
So I got Notre Dame minus 2.5, and the total's at 45.5.
Oh, Penn State plus 2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I have the same thing.
Yeah. Our original thought was, or at least our thought from last week when we just touched on this game, is that they're relatively even looking teams. To me, the X factor on Penn State is Tyler Warren, and Notre Dame doesn't necessarily have that kind of player that's just, how do you account for a guy that can do all of that stuff? Also, Kotelnicki, I'm guessing, has some stuff they haven't shown yet with him, and they've got some crazy stuff they have shown. So where he snaps the ball, then they throw it to Aller, then he catches the touchdown. Like, I'm sure they've got 1 or 2 of those things ready to go in this game if the situation like presents itself. And I asked you, who do you think Notre Dame's X factor was? And you said Riley Leonard. There is no really other player on that team that could be the X factor.
And he was the reason why they won that game against Georgia. Right.
And then, do we know at the time recording? I don't know if we know if Jeremiah Love's playing or not.
Don't know, but
Right.
it's looking like that guy for Penn State is the defensive player.
Oh,
The
Abdul
yeah,
Carter. Yes. Okay. So then if that's the case, I'm even more confident picking Penn State.
yeah. So here's the thing. So I'm going to pull from the John Barbin's Goldfish recency bias. Notre Dame. The only reason why they beat Georgia was a kickoff return for a touchdown and a
Yes.
turnover within the 10-yard line. That was 14 points
Yep.
right there. Otherwise, they scored 9 and Georgia had 10. Okay.
Mhm.
So assuming like you can never predict some turnovers or things like that, but I don't think it's going to happen again. And so,
That's
and
good. That's a good way to look
they
at
were
it.
only
Yeah.
able to move a little, like barely against Georgia. I think Penn State's defense is just as good, especially if Carter's playing. And Penn State has offensive weapons that will be able to. The tight end is a good matchup, and they've got really good running backs. But the Notre Dame is really great at stopping the run. They did that against Georgia. They did a
Mhm.
great job with that. But Penn State has got 2 great running backs, and the tight end I think is really going to be Warren's really going to be the X factor because it's really hard to stop the run and the tight end at the same time. So I think Penn State can move the ball. I think Notre Dame's luck runs out. That was not planned right there. And no, I think Penn State plus the 2.5 all day long.
Yeah. I see it the same way. And you know what is unfortunate for James Franklin is if he wins this game, they're still going to say you got the weakest draw.
Do you think people can still make the argument
I think
that
people can.
James Franklin hasn't won a big one?
I think people can. Well, even if they win this one,
Wow.
they've gone from SMU, who many
Yeah.
people say shouldn't have been in the playoffs. Then they got Boise, who many
Yeah.
people think didn't deserve a bye, let alone being in the playoffs, like Alabama, South Carolina fans. I'm looking at you guys thinking, what the hell were they doing there instead of us? But they were going to put a conference championship winner in, but to a man, Penn State just has more 4 and 5 star talent than Boise. So it's sort of, that is what it is. So that one doesn't necessarily favor James Franklin finally getting over the hump. SMU certainly doesn't. And then if they beat the Irish, you could also make the argument that's sort of the weakest remaining team. So they still have drawn. I mean, first of all, they didn't have to win a conference championship game, so they got in with one less data point and one less big win. And I mean, the Irish, I think a lot of people would agree that that's not going to be the most impressive win versus if they beat Ohio State or Texas or that sort of team in this round. So they're going to have to get all the way to the national championship and beat either Ohio State or Texas for someone to finally give Franklin his flowers for winning a big one against a big team.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think that once you've made it to 4 teams make it to the semifinals, right? So there's a lot of teams that didn't, including like Oregon, Georgia, Tennessee, like teams that were good. And so I don't know if that narrative is like, you're right. People are going to say it, but I mean, there was over 100 football teams that started this season, and now there's just 4, and they're one of them. So you can't really be that upset about that. But saying let's get back to the game. So we've got Notre Dame and Penn State. We're going to take Penn State plus 2.5. We feel pretty good about it. The total 45.5. What do you have any thoughts about that one?
I mean, my initial thought is under.
Yeah, me too. It mostly because I don't think a lot of points are going to be scored. I mean, I guess that's the main reason, but also like both teams like to run the ball and like decrease the game plan for both teams is going to be the same, which is sort of decrease the number of possessions the other team has, control the ball. If Penn State gets a lead, they're just going to be alternating between Allen and Singleton, just trying to run the ball like that. Notre Dame's the same. We're not sure time of recording of Love's playing or not, but that doesn't change what they'd want to do anyway for that. So yeah, I feel best about the Penn State plus 2.5, but we could throw in the under too if you want to do that as well.
I'll take the under, and I'm not super confident. Well, I'm definitely not confident in any real run game from Notre Dame if Love's not in.
Yes, no, and it's something they really struggle with.
The other running back's good too, but I mean, he's I think their best weapon.
Yeah, he absolutely is. He had the best game. He was the reason, I believe, why they beat Indiana really back in the day. So no, that's a good point.
Yeah. So if that's the case, I can see it being a low scoring game. Riley Leonard, obviously, that offense is just limited passing. So unless he just has a uncharacteristic, really good passing game, then I just don't. This is seems obvious it's going to be the under. But again, it's famous last words.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, I think it's barring the some turnovers or things like that, but it's
Yep. All right. So Penn State and the under. All right. So moving on, Ohio State, Texas.
Oh, great game.
What's your initial feeling on just this game in general? Not the lines or the spread or anything.
My initial feeling is that if Ohio State or Texas were playing either Notre Dame or Penn State, both of them would be favored, meaning like Ohio State or Texas would. They're the two, to me, two of the best teams left in the playoffs. Like, they're 1 and 2, and then Penn State, Notre Dame's like 3 and 4. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So it feels like this would have been a really cool national championship game, or is this too much? I think whoever wins this is going to be favored in the next one.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
I think so.
Anyway, so that was my take from it. And it's going to be if Ohio State can keep the train rolling, right? Like they've looked like a different team, the demolishing Tennessee, demolishing Oregon, those are two really good teams. Texas is a good team too, but Ohio State, the way that they're going, looks like they could stop them as well. Texas has worried me on some of their just not putting it together. Like Arizona State they let them back in that thing. It didn't have to be like that, and they did. There's Texas offense sometimes goes away. Texas defense sometimes goes away.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. So it's a little inconsistent. And
they gave up 500 yards to Arizona State.
Yeah, and you can't be, and to an Arizona State team that literally had like Scattaboo and like that's about it.
Their best receiver wasn't there.
I know. Yeah. So I'm worried about the offense. Worried about the defense. So that's why Ohio State's favored by 6. So,
and Texas typically, or at least in the last number of games, can get in its own way with penalties and just not being disciplined.
Yeah, so it's at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington, but Ohio State will travel and it should be 50-50. So I'm not super worried about that, but it's anyway. So what are your thoughts? What are your picks?
I don't think there's a real body clock thing there either for Ohio State. That's not a big deal. Right now, I don't. Okay, you're gonna call it recency bias for me, but now we have 2 data points in a row of Ohio State looking complete in all phases of the game. This looks like the best defense, the best offense. Well, I mean, I think it statistically is the best defense in college football, and it looks every bit like that. Then the offense, at least since we got past the Michigan game, looks like the best offense in college football. Jeremiah Smith looks like the most unstoppable player in college football. And I mean, we just saw them, all 4 of their best players, Ibuka, Smith, Judkins, and Henderson, all go for almost, Smith went bananas, but all of them were approaching over 100 yards. So that is just way, way too much firepower. And now we hear about Texas's defense, but then they gave up 500 yards to Arizona State.
Smith is so much better than any wide receiver that Texas saw against Arizona State, right?
Well, you could say that about everybody everywhere because he's better than every wide receiver in the country.
I understand that, but the difference between Smith and everyone that they played against Arizona State is massive.
Yeah. So it is some recency bias, but now they've done it twice in a row to Tennessee and Oregon. And if we believe anything about Oregon being a good team, which they beat Ohio State earlier this year, right? They hadn't
Oregon's
lost
a great
yet.
team.
Yeah. So if there's anything to take away from that game, Ohio State looks completely overwhelming. Yeah. So let's do the A game thing. If both teams show up with their A game, who wins?
Well, the way you were talking, I was going to say we should just take Iowa State minus the 6, like
I'm absolutely doing that.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so let's do that. So because I agree with you, I think it is recency, but it's also like those are 2 games isn't nothing. Like it's the clobbering Tennessee and clobbering Oregon is something, and the way that it happened too, like it was really imposed their will offensively and defensively. So I think it's really good. Okay, so if both teams have their A game, this is going to be a classic because both teams can look really good. Both teams can look really good on offense. Both teams can look really good on defense, right? Yep. So I think Ohio State would win a squeaker if both teams have their A games. But the way Texas has been playing, I don't think I think this could get out of hand quickly. Like if this goes down to, again, like Ohio State goes up at 2 scores in the first half or something like that, it's gonna be just like the Oregon game, where like now Texas is like forced to pass, and they can't rely on their being well balanced and stuff, and no one does well in that situation, especially them. So,
all right. So can you pull up Texas's schedule?
yes,
Because my argument is, when have we seen Texas with their A game yet?
That's a great question.
Who
That's
is
similar
it?
to like
And I don't mean against
Georgia, right? It hasn't had like a full game. It's
Georgia never played an A game. Georgia never, not once this year,
not a
played
complete game.
Well, when I say A, I mean a complete game, minimal penalties, on point, like you actually performed all 4 quarters at your capability.
Yeah.
And Georgia couldn't do that all year. They played halves. They played a couple of quarters a game at what would be their maximum level, but not all 4.
Sure.
Ohio State just did it twice.
Yes.
And they looked
against
like
good teams.
Against good teams, and no one could touch them.
All right.
Has Texas done that?
Texas schedule.
Yeah.
Colorado State won 52-0.
Yep.
Michigan beat 31-12. But Michigan, they were ranked 10th back then. So UTSA 56-7.
Well, hang on. Do you consider that they're an A game?
No, I'm going through the whole schedule.
No. But I'm okay. Sorry.
No, so not the A game against Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah. UTSA 56-7. UL Monroe 51-3. Mississippi State 35-13. Oklahoma 34-3. But that's when Oklahoma's ranked 18th. They didn't finish that way. So Georgia lost 30-15. Got handled by Georgia.
Yeah.
Vandy 27-24. Closer than you would have thought. Florida is probably their A game, to be honest, looking at the schedule now, because that was 49-17. Now, Florida, they had injuries and stuff. So
was Lagway even playing that game?
No, I don't think he was.
So. Right.
Yeah. Arkansas, they beat 20-10. Not necessarily an A game. Kentucky 31-14. Maybe that one. That might have been it. The Ewers only had 191 yards passing, but Wisner had 158 yards rushing. Beat Texas A&M 17-7. Maybe, but again, limited offense,
because their offense did. Yeah. I think one of those scores was defensive.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yes, I think you're right on that. Georgia lost 22-19 overtime. Beat Clemson 38-24. So maybe that one you would.
All right. So
and then Arizona State. So 39-31.
That was not an A game. They could have lost that game.
So either the Clemson game or the Kentucky.
All right, so look at what we just did to try to find their A game.
Yeah,
it's either against Clemson or Kentucky, and Ohio State's last 2 games, I would say, were A game against one of the, I guess you could say, better representatives in the SEC. And if we're going to try to pluck one of those games for Texas, Ohio State's A game against Tennessee. I mean, Texas. We're trying to find it against either Clemson or Kentucky, which is a weaker team. And then Ohio State completely blows the doors off of Oregon. Texas doesn't even have one win like that, let alone 2.
I know. So they got doing the same thing now with Ohio State schedule. Yeah. Okay, so Akron 52-6, Western Michigan 56, Marshall 49-14, Michigan State 38-7, not terrible. Against Iowa 35-7, against a good Iowa defense team. Like that's a pretty good game.
Well, I remember that game. Iowa does that to good teams. It takes about a half, and then Ohio State just pulled away.
Yeah, lost Oregon 32-31, but easily could have gone either way on that one, right? Because of the beat Nebraska 21-17, Penn State 20-13, Purdue 45-0. So like,
but everyone did that to Purdue.
Do what you're supposed to do against the Northwestern 31-7. Indiana, when Indiana was good, 38-15, they beat them. That's a pretty good game. And then there's that anomaly, the loss 13-10 to Michigan, and then beat Tennessee 42-17, 41-21. So anyway, to finish your point, I think you're absolutely right. There's more A games on Ohio State's schedule than there were on Texas's.
But they have 2 A games. They're most 2 recent against good teams.
Yeah, but I also think the A game against Indiana November 23rd was something, because Indiana was really good.
Sure.
I think the win against Penn State 20-13 was really good. Those are, those are 2 other playoff teams that they beat.
Yeah. So that's Texas has personnel, but they just haven't put it together. And 2 losses to Georgia does not look good. And then having to go to overtime to beat Arizona State, which there was they could have lost that game. That's not like, it's not like it was, Arizona State, when they finally started coming back in the fourth quarter, it's like, oh, this team can win this game. It's not like that game was ever out of reach. They had them on fourth down.
Yep.
So Texas is yet to put their full A game on display. I think, at least against a really legitimate team. Obviously, they beat up the weaker teams, but where is their? They just don't have two comparable games like what Ohio State just put together. So if part of this new 12-team playoff is more in the NFL style of peaking at the right time, because anyone can win the Super Bowl as long as they get in the playoffs. Some teams get in with a lower seed and just go on a heater. Pittsburgh's done that, right? So, but obviously in the NFL, the talent is much closer together. The best team and the worst team anybody can beat anyone in the NFL. College isn't quite like that. But now, at least with the 12-team playoff, it could be that whoever peaks during the playoff is what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of being one of the best rosters in the country, which Ohio State is. So when you get one of your top 3 or 4 rosters also peaking, if they can keep this up in those 2 games now, that's starting to be a trend. I think their A game is going to crush Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree.
And if Texas brings their A game versus A game, Ohio State wins. If Texas brings their A game, Ohio State still has to make some kind of mistake to get in their way. I don't think if they both show up at full power, or at least let me say it this way. We don't have any proof or data points to show that Texas's A game can beat a good team, because there's no data point that's happened yet.
No, and I think that also speaks to like the fact that anyone is even considering going to like Arch Manning at this point and stuff. It's like really shows you how not confident they are in their in Ewers. Like, he's played fine, but like the offense just hasn't looked as good as it should have. But anyway, listen, they're in the semifinal, which is, so there's only 4 teams there, right? So they're a good team, but
so
it does.
What does it look like if Texas does win?
Well, that's crazy. Then they'll be favored against whoever they play in the final.
No. How does this game have to go?
Oh, okay. So Texas has to be able to run the ball against Ohio State, and then Texas is balanced on offense, so they can balance their throwing and passing. Ohio State has a couple of ill-timed turnovers and has to rely just on passing to stay into it. And the Texas kicker decides not to have a bad day.
Oh yeah, the kicker. What about the penalties?
You're right. Sorry. Clean game. That'll have to be like less penalties.
So for Texas to win, they have to run the ball. They have to stop the run.
Yeah.
The field goal kicker actually has to kick some critical field goals, and they have to keep the game clean from a penalty standpoint, which they haven't done. Not in the last month and a half.
All those things haven't happened at once.
All those things haven't happened in one game.
No. And I really think whereas Ohio State, there's a few different ways. Like like Trayvon Henderson could just have a massive game. Smith can have another.
I think Ohio State can win a rock fight and a track meet.
Yes.
I don't know if Texas can do both.
That's interesting.
I don't know. Maybe. It's partly just because we haven't seen him do it against a powerful team yet. I mean, the 2 data points against Georgia really don't help.
No.
Because when they played against what is a flawed but really talented team, they lost both. Mm-hmm. And they got in their way for sure in the second one. They got in their way all over the place with inexplicable red zone penalties that kept pushing them out of back out of the red zone, and then relying on the kicker who can't hit a kick. So
they were up on Arizona State by 16 points
and let them right
the
back
fourth
in the
quarter.
Game. Yes,
and a good team doesn't do that.
No, and 500 yards on they've gave up 500 yards. I guess it just seems like maybe this line is right where it belongs. If not, could be bigger. And Ohio State, I think, can win this multiple different ways. It looks like, and I mean, is there an X factor on Texas if that particular player goes off?
Good question.
Can determine it. I don't know if they have that a particular guy quite like that.
I mean, it's the Ewers can have an incredible game. Like, he threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against Arizona State, so he's capable of that. The Weiser is really their first running back, and he's had some good games. He only rushed for 45 yards against Arizona State, which isn't a good sign.
That's not good either.
The real X factor that was for Texas was Golden. I don't know if you remember. He's the receiver.
Yes.
That was like caught. He had 7 catches for 149 yards. So that's the. But yeah,
they basically have to play a complete game, and it's got to be clean.
Yeah.
for them to win. Ohio State, I think, can afford to have a couple mistakes and still win this game.
Yeah.
All right. What do you want? Do you want to do anything with the over/under?
Nope.
Nope.
No, I feel good about Ohio State and
Ohio State
because it's a high total, and I'd kick myself if we took the under and it turns into like a 38-32,
which it definitely could
absolutely
could. Yeah. It could go either direction.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't, and I feel like an idiot if we, So we'll just take the Ohio State.
All right. Well, that's where we're at for the semifinals. Hopefully they're entertaining. I think they should.
Oh yeah. Be. No, I think they'll be good games.
All right. Well, check back in with us,
and then we'll do our review of the two semifinal games after on Friday or Saturday.
Yep. Shortly thereafter. So join us. Come back to the channel for that show. We'll catch you later.